Hey everyone, I'm Matt Raczynski and you're listening to the Aleph Zero podcast. Today we are meeting with Alessandro de Carli, co-founder of Acurast, which is building on Aleph Zero and other networks. And we'll discuss the unique proposition for changing how we view cloud computing. One of the most exciting narratives steering in the blockchain space is the intersection between software and hardware solutions that leverage blockchain technology to create new vehicles for decentralizing the physical world. And this is a narrative that Acurast feels strongly about. Hi, Alessandro. Good to have you on the show.
Hey, Mateusz. Thank you for having us, actually.
I'm really fascinated by what you are doing in Acurast. So, before I steal your thunder and divulge too much information, can you go ahead and, explain what exactly Acurast is up to? What do you guys do there?
Yes, sure. So Acurast is effectively a decentralized serverless cloud. And this means that it allows developers to deploy workloads at the convenience that they know from self-centralized alternatives, but of course at a fraction of the price or the fraction of the cost. And it also has some neat features and functionality added to it.
Yeah, and from what I understand, Acurast offers four products like compute, crawl, data feed, and data on demand. So could you explain what these four pillars are and what are those services exactly?
Yes, sure. So if we now zoom back a little, all of these four products or categories that you mentioned should really be seen as more kind of use cases or categories, which Acurus is really strong in. But it's important to understand that underlying there is always the very same execution environment. And this is also what powers this decentralized serverless cloud. And if we take a look at the current landscape of cloud computing in general, we will soon find out that it is basically dominated by three main players. We have Amazon, Google, and then, of course, as well, Microsoft. And this centralization effectively comes at a very high price. I mean, first of all and foremost, if we just take a look at the economic aspect, we all know that a monopoly is driving up prices. And if we also take a look at the offering from these centralized clouds, they are quite pricey. It's not cheap to work with them. Then, of course, there is also accessibility, an aspect which, when we take a look at decentralization, has always been key, right? We always go for decentralization because we also see this democratization. All of these US tech giants don't offer their service everywhere. I mean, there's like lesser developed countries that cannot even sign up for these services. But this, and then also the fact that the service by itself is not cheap, means that parts of the world are entirely excluded and also underserviced. But there is one more thing that I would like to add here as well, that there is a hidden cost, namely you completely lose ownership over your data, because all of your data now starts flowing directly through the pipes of these tech giants, and it will no longer be yours, right? It's shared with them. Okay, I mean, this is obvious because they're hosting your stuff, but it's also shared with the like endless list of their suppliers and of course the governments. And that's why we changed the rules by having a decentralized approach instead, and wanted to remove borders wherever possible so that the development status of your region does not impact or play a role whether you're able to use this service or not. And this empowers ultimately millions to participate.
And where, because you're using recycled hardware to facilitate the computation, so where this idea to recycle hardware came from?
This requires maybe a little bit more context of my background, because I started my career as a mobile security engineer at Credit Suisse. And this is also where I realized that the mobile device is the device that has the least privileges when it comes to physical security. And this also means that since everyone wanted and was pushing really hard to use these devices for all sorts of security relevant tasks like managing your identity, managing your bank account, your trading account, your crypto wallets, and so on and so forth, the engineer over at Google and as well at iOS were really pushing the hardware manufacturer to come up with secure hardware modules that, if you take a look today, there is no better hardware security module on the market than the one in mobile devices, because they simply don't have the privilege of being inside a data center that is being secured physically. Now, if you start to combine this knowledge with the fact that these little champions offer the highest level of compute per watt that you can find, if you compare it with a server that has the same amount of compute, is over 50x more efficient, you have the ultimate hardware for a decentralized and disruptive cloud effectively. But there is also another amazing thing, and this is what you are basically mentioning. As we progressed in the project, we were not aware of this when we first started, but as we used these very underutilized devices, we saw that our users actually started to buy up phones that had broken screens, because the platform simply does not care about this broken screen as long as the compute unit is intact. And this is amazing, right? Because now you have all these dirt cheap compute units just lying around completely unused. People don't know what to do with them. And now they have a story. They can basically just upcycle these devices within 3 minutes. It's super easy. Anyone can do it. And then basically start earning some tokens by providing computational power for this decentralized cloud, right? So you should definitely check your drawer, because you might have a hidden champion in there.
Yeah, and this sounds like a great use case to the cloud that you're building, but what other use cases are already there, or are you looking forward to see, using Acurast?
So I mentioned before, and I alluded to these additional features and functionalities and guarantees that the platform offers you. And one of these come from the verifiable compute execution environment that it offers. And the cool thing is that effectively this allows you to do these kind of tasks that are basically observing a certain data point and then bring it on chain in a verifiable way. And in both cases, right, you can just observe in an interval, then you have this feed. This is where the product Oracle's data feed comes out. And then you also have the on-demand case, where you build up a secure channel to this execution environment and then ask on demand, hey, I would like for you to observe that data point. So oracles in general, so self-service oracles in general, are definitely one of the main use cases that we see on the platform today. I don't think that these are the most exciting ones, nor do I think that this is where it's limited to, because one quite interesting project that we now started to work with, it's a project that is optimized or is specialized in creating game engines for the Web3 space. And for them, what is cool about this is that you are able to create a secure environment where you can facilitate a multiplayer poker game without anyone, any central party knowing the cards and so on and so forth, because now you have this trusted execution environment provided by the mobile device that then you can interact with in a sub-second way. And people can really do these multiplayer games, and when they're finished, they just get back out of that game and can settle their transaction wherever they were coming from. Like, for instance, Aleph Zero as an example, right? So I think these are the kind of use cases that excite me even more than the Oracle use case. But in future, I believe that we definitely need to be attractive also to Web2 developers in general, because I think that that's ultimately where you have a lot of adoption and a lot of more use cases.
Yeah, so a question that comes to my mind is that AWS and other cloud centralized, let's say, cloud providers are so commonly used for a reason. So what's the key advantage for using this decentralized cloud? Is it privacy, as you mentioned, or also other features?
We are using these hardware security modules in mobile devices to create a confidential computing environment that is also verifiable. And I explained before why verifiability is interesting. But what this ultimately means is that if you sign up as a processor, so you happen to find a device in your drawer and you say, okay, I want now to sign up as a processor, even though I will be paying you to run my workloads, and you run those workloads, you have all the data that these workloads manipulate and then bring back in one way or the other, you are not able to read a single bit of that data because it is running in this very closed execution environment that you cannot observe from the outside. Like you cannot even start debugging that phone even if you have physical access. And this property is super, super powerful. And I think if we take a look at the geopolitical landscape, it will become more and more powerful as time progresses because people will realize the value of truly owning their data more and more. But let's maybe just ignore all this idealistic aspect, which I believe is super important. I see that mobile devices have running costs for the same level of the compute that a server can provide that is 50x cheaper. This means that the other super exciting aspect is that developers will just choose this platform because it is effectively cheaper to run their workloads on it. We did a couple of calculations, and if you are looking for an 8-core, 8 gigabytes of RAM machine on Google Clouds and so on and so forth, you will find out that it is about $300 to purchase that service. Now, with Acurast, already paying a processor just $10 for that compute power makes a positive business case for them, because if they're able to buy a phone that has 8 cores, 8 gigabytes of RAM with a broken screen, they can get them for, I don't know, $25. Running them costs them near to nothing because these are very efficient devices. This means that if you receive them every month $10, it's already very interesting and a high incentive for you to run these devices. So I think that we will be super competitive as well on the pricing side. So people will ultimately also choose this platform because it's just cheaper to use it and they receive more bang for their buck.
Yeah, it sounds like a really well thought business model, but also for the users, right? So yeah, definitely economics incentives are one, but if the service is just cheaper and the same or better as the existing solutions, it clearly shows its strengths. And also when you are talking about privacy, of course, like trusted execution environments provide you total privacy, but what about in general data confidentiality and privacy of the service when it comes to bringing those calculations back, right? How are you tackling this? Is it like the verifiability comes from zk technology or some other methods?
So right now, Acurast itself has one execution environment. This execution environment is basically hardware bound. This means that ultimately the secure elements of your mobile device, in this case, are the thing that bring you this verifiability. So you receive an attestation and then also the output of the workload, and you can check that this output is linked to that attestation, meaning you know that the execution happened just like you have defined it and has not been manipulated with. This current execution environment is not leveraging any of the ZK technology, but it's of course for sure interesting as well to start thinking about an execution environment that can get scheduled and orchestrated through Acurast, but is indeed then using the ZK environment to provide that service. I think you always need to apply the right technology for the right use case. So if you need this level of performance that the devices can bring you for really running high performance tasks, then I think that going with this hardware bound approach is currently feasible because, as you know, all the ZK technology at the moment comes with a huge overhead, making it not feasible for all the use cases. And eventually, I hope that, of course, we will be able to run all the use cases with ZK technology. And that's also where Acurast can then have one of the execution environments only ZK based.
Yeah, and what's the general benefit of building Acurast on multiple chains? And I'm also coming, down to Aleph Zero. So, what are you mainly looking for with Aleph Zero, and expanding to Aleph Zero?
The philosophy that we were going for since the very beginning was to make Acurast as accessible as possible, regardless of the tech stack that a developer chooses. And being a project that has some ties into Web3, of course, the Web3 developer group was one of our first target groups. I think that what is super interesting about Aleph Zero is the whole latency that is very, very minimal, allowing for super nice user experience, and then also all the privacy that comes with it. Um, but you see, Acurast itself would never be the layer where you have some smart contracts running because all of the computation on Acurast happens actually then off chain in these execution environments. So I feel that it's kind of the perfect synergies between the two because then you have the security provided by a full validator set that is securing a blockchain such as Aleph Zero, and then you also then have the ability for your specific use case to run a workload that then happens either in the Web 2 world, like you kind of receive this abstraction that allows you to communicate with all sorts of other components and system as well. So that's how I see the synergies between these two projects in general. And if we now take a look at the interest that came from Aleph Zero, we had a hackathon. Of course, people are mostly interested for the Oracle side of things, which is fair. I think that's where Acurast really excels. But I really hope that we're able to even push this further to see some applications that have not been seen before that really leverage the best feature and functionalities of both platforms.
Yeah, I think Oracle is just a natural fit for it, but all the use cases beyond are possibly just around the corner. So let's say I'm a user, I have this phone lying in my drawer. So what is the economic incentive to provide my phone as a node? What ensures the sustainability of this model?
So the reason why this is sustainable in the long term is because you're not just getting paid with some magical tokens, but effectively you're getting paid by a developer that needs to host a certain workload. And you're providing a service effectively. You're providing them with the compute that they're looking for. These developers spend that kind of money already today in the centralized cloud. So there is kind of the need for such a service already around, and now you're just redirecting the payment stream and also the service offering to Acurast as a platform. So that's where ultimately the sustainability comes into play of it. However, like with every platform, you have this kind of chicken and egg problem where you may be stronger on one side than on the other side. So you may be stronger with how many processors are being signed up and offer computational power versus how many developers are using them. And that's where you do have today basically a protocol subsidy that pays you for every heart beating device. So if eventually the subsidy will entirely be removed, maybe it will be replaced with a task that the protocol itself needs and is willing to pay, right? I mean, why pay another cloud provider for some compute if you can then just start using yourself that stuff and basically push it out to all of the processors that are live. But yes, I think the sustainability is definitely not this protocol subsidy. It's kind of bootstrapping the whole system, and it's working pretty well. And I see as well that more and more people are finding some devices. I mean, if you join our Discord, you will soon see that basically every weekend we have a new boost of people that come up with these pictures of having, I don't know, 10, 20 devices all set up with Acurast, which are super cool to manage because you have a centralized or a central console, which is not centralized, where then you can just start managing it. Yes, so I think ultimately that's the thing, right? This is not just a project that gives out tokens and then at some point the value of the token just starts to drop, but it's really people paying for the service over this platform that ultimately makes it sustainable.
Yeah, so there's an underlying value. And what devices are supported? Can I use an iPhone, or are you focused on like the chips like Google Tensor only?
So it's a very cool question because we used to be limited just to Google Tensor devices, so Android Google Tensor devices such as the Pixel line from Google, also some Samsung devices, because these offer the highest level of security in their trusted execution environment, which we leverage heavily. At some point, we, however, realized, hey, you can also onboard other devices onto Acurast. They still receive an attestation. They still have security elements in them. We can still provide this kind of secure execution environment, but of course, don't offer the same level of security like a Google TensorFlow. So today, basically, every Android device that is over Android 12, so that you can upgrade over Android 12, will be most probably supported. Like I have not seen an Android 12 device yet that is not supported, but never say never. However, what is important is the developer on the other side can say, okay, I have a workload that requires the highest level of security, such as observing a price and proving to the world that this price really came from Binance. And then they can select the level of security on the other side. And maybe one developer just says, I just need to run some tests. I just need to play around with something, run and deploy a small backend. And then they can just opt for the cheaper but less secure option.
Yeah, and you mostly refer to Acurast as a cloud service provider, or decentralized cloud. But would you say that is there a reason for why you are not openly speaking about the DePin narrative? Would you say that Acurast is part of it?
Yes, I would say definitely that Acurast is a part of it. I am also fully aware that DePin is now a very hyped topic. But I mean, when we started developing this project, it's about 3 years ago, right? And no one was talking about DePin back then. It's more kind of a chance, or I don't know, like it's random that now this DePin narrative came up and we fit pretty well inside that narrative. I think mobile devices are the champions of decentralization, and mobile devices are as well the champions of DePin in general. So, yeah, I definitely believe that we are part of that narrative and maybe should. I don't know, like my interest is more on the technical side and less on the marketing side, but I am aware that both are super important and maybe we should also push more to position us in this narrative better.
It just brings attention, and attention is definitely there with DePin. So definitely, that might be a direction. But since you are actually, uh, you know in that you're witnessing this sector growing, where would you see it in a few years? Of course, I'd say that growing, but do you see any real use cases that might come up within like 2 or 3 years?
Oh yes, absolutely. I see a huge boost in. So if you take a look at Europe and also the US, we have the privilege of having all this kind of super nice infrastructure with railroads and fiber glass internet and everything, right? This is just not the case for every country in the world. But, and now I'm coming back as well, why I believe that mobile devices are the ultimate tool. If you take a look at the countries that are now starting to develop, they can already opt for 5G antennas. They don't need to come up with all these sorts of cables and legacy infrastructure. So effectively, they can start leapfrogging. And I see that DePin is part of this leapfrogging because now all of a sudden you're able to build on top of this infrastructure in a decentralized way and start offering services that are only known in centralized contexts. And I see this as the ultimate play for DePin because you make it really accessible to everyone and it becomes very democratic.
Yeah, it sounds just right, and there's definitely a fit for it. But also, I think one of the larger barriers, in general in Web3, what keeps Web3 or keeps Web3 from mainstream success is the user experience. So, how would you address that in Acurast, or how are you addressing that to make the service as user friendly as possible?
I feel like I'm a little bit a broken record here, but as well, the mobile device, it's really amazing because if you want to become a processor on the Acurast side, you don't need to be a Linux geek. You don't need to know how to connect via SSH to your box and then start tinkering around with all these packages. No, you just unbox the device, you wipe it, you scan a QR code, boom, that's done. You receive then a console where you can manage that device, update the device, and so on and so forth. And if you see, it's true, right? The mobile device is the ultimate device that has allowed us humans to increase user experience throughout the use cases, right? I mean, payments are one of them, but then also browsing, taking pictures, everything is just driven by these devices at the highest possible level of user experience. Why? Because there is a huge incentive for someone to create a better application than all the other applications that can offer that level of experience because the population that is using the device and the number of minutes spent by every human in the world with these devices is just so big that the potential, even if you just incrementally improve the user experience, is just there, right? So I think that leveraging mobile devices is definitely one of the things that we are doing and believe that can help with lowering the entry barrier. But of course, like we're not there yet, right? I think we still need to improve a lot on our side, and we're doing and working hard to get there. But yes, I think mobile devices will stay and play a key role for Acurast. And then, of course, start thinking about okay, if we have this decentralized cloud, what can we do differently that maybe a centralized player is not capable of doing? How can we rethink maybe also outside the box so that can increase the user experience as well, or developer experience, right? Because developers are users too, ultimately, right?
Yeah, but also you mentioned about the process of getting your phone up and running within Acurast. So technically, is it that I scan the QR code, I just open site, and then that's it, or do I need to download an app?
So we have three stages of how Acurast can be run. And today, so we have three in vision, and today only one is actually implemented. And the version that you have today, you really have to dedicate your phone to the network. You will no longer be able to make any phone calls with it or use it for anything else. You have to dedicate it. And the way you dedicate it is that you start with a phone that is entirely wiped, and when you open up the phone, power it up, it will come up with this hello screen, right? Where it says hello, blah, blah, blah. Now, if you tap 8 times just on the screen, on that very first screen, you will be amazed to see that a QR code reader shows up. And this QR code reader is basically an API offered by all Android devices to really take full control over that mobile device and turn it into a single purpose device. And that's basically what we're doing. The device then scans the QR that is being shown on your Acurast console and then transforms itself to an Acurast processor. If you want to reuse the device, of course, you can do that. But then what will effectively happen is that you need to fully wipe it again, and then yeah, you can use it as you're used to before. That's basically how that process looks like, and it's very, very user friendly, and it takes just about 3 minutes. But in future, what we'll have is a similar API that basically isolates the Acurast environment entirely from your personal environment, and this is what we call the side by side mode. And that's something that the team now is working pretty hard on it to make it happen. And that's more into the direction of what you were saying before, where actually you can just download an app and then go through this transformation and let it run side by side. If you no longer want to have Acurast, you can then just say, okay, let me close this profile, and then that isolation just goes away, and then you're just with your personal device profile.
Okay, yeah, sounds awesome. So the last question, and you just shared a bit of it, but what are other plans for Acurast's, future?
Yes, here as well you have different layers and topics, right? Because we now launched an ambassador program to basically spread the visibility and also have some fans that help others onboard their devices. And we'll have a loyalty program page soon come up. So this is on the public facing side. The integrated network today into Aleph Zero is our Canary network. This is kind of the bleeding edge network where you have a lot of fast updates, and the developers are pushing almost weekly, and if not weekly, bi-weekly updates to that protocol. And that's perfectly fine, but we'll have a mainnet launch which has a way longer release cycle with way longer, so with the idea that it is more long-term support somewhere in September or October of this year. And in between, there's a lot of new things that we have on the tech roadmap, as well as campaigns that we're running to really onboard more and more users.
All right, thanks for that. So that's all I had for you today. Thank you for joining us.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you so much. And I forgot to say this, but I hope that we'll be able in future, just like now, do more with the Aleph Zero community, because of course it's an amazing community. It's an amazing piece of technology. And also we're super happy for the support that we have received so far. And yeah, who knows? Maybe we'll be able to do more of these things in the near future.
Yeah, definitely. Looking forward to it, and good luck with development of the project. And thank you to all the listeners who tuned in. That's all for today. Bye.